Welcome to today's webinar, Feminine Norms, a Key to Improving STEM Outcomes by RIKI Wilchins. My name is Greg Nagy, and I'm the Virtual Learning Community Manager from The Ohio State University, who provides technical support for the STEM Equity Pipeline Project. Before we start this presentation, I would like to go over some housekeeping items for this webinar. This webinar is scheduled to last roughly 45 minutes and is being recorded in order to view this presentation in its entirety later. The recorded webinar will be available in the next few days on the STEMequitypipeline.org website. As you've already found out, you will be watching the presenter present slides through the Adobe Connect interface while listening to her talk over your computer speakers. All of the participants' microphones have been automatically muted. You can make the presentation larger by clicking the full screen button at the top of your Adobe Connect window. You can also download the slides and other files from the Files pod at the bottom left of your Adobe Connect window. Click on the file you want to download and then click the Download File button. This will open the file as a link in a different tab in your browser. The presenter will answer questions after the presentation. However, we can take questions at any time. This is how we take questions. At any time during the presentation, you may submit a question by typing your question in the chat pod at the bottom of the Adobe Connect window. We will read and respond to these questions at the end of the presentation. I'd like to start the webinar by introducing Freda Walker, consultant for the STEM Equity Pipeline Project. Freda?
Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon, and welcome to the National Alliance for Partnerships and Equity and the STEM Equity Pipeline webinar. Let's see. NAEPS funds this webinar through a grant from the National Science Foundation. I'd like to start today by asking how you heard about the webinar. There are a variety of choices here, and some of them ask you to chat. If you'll do that in the chat function, Greg is going to post the poll, and now you can vote. Okay, thank you. Let's end the poll. Oh no, some people are still, I think we're pretty good. We'll end the poll. I can see that most people are still getting it from the pipeline mailing list, but also we're getting some from colleagues again and a few from the website, so thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. I would like to remind you that all of our webinars are archived at the STEMequitypipeline.org website. Also, if you'd like a certificate of completion when you fill out your evaluation survey, there's a section for you to indicate that. I'd also like to remind you that down in the Files section on the left-hand side of your screen, you're going to see two documents. One is the PowerPoint, if you'd like to download that, and also there's a resource document that has the links that are talked about in this webinar presentation. Just hit highlight the ones that you want and then download the files. Remind you that we would like for you to use the chat function to share information or to ask questions, or if you have other documents that are information resources that you can share, that you can type them into the chat function. We will take questions at the end of the presentation. Who's participating today? This will give our presenter an idea of who's on. This is a poll, so you can see the different items that you can choose, and chat if you'd like to tell us which group you're with. Well, it looks like that let's post that, Greg. Looks like we have a pretty good cross-section of people that have joined us today. Those of you that put other, please type in the chat function what organization or agency that you represent. Thank you, Greg. I also would like to know, is there anyone else watching this webinar with you? You can see what the chat function is about, so let's put the poll up and see how many other people are watching with you. Well, it looks like today that we have most people are watching by themselves. Sometimes we have other people that have joined us, so thank you for answering the question. I'd like to start by introducing our speaker again, and we're just so pleased that she will join us and share her research and resources with us. RIKI, you're on.
Well, I just want to thank you, Frida and Freda, and also Gregory and Mimi at NAPE for making this possible, and of course OSU and SF as well. Thank you all for coming today. We're going to talk about what I think is a really interesting subject that hopefully most people will kind of get in their bones, but we don't always talk about, which is the impact of internalized ideas around femininity on girls' STEM interests and achievement. So a little bit about me. I've been doing this for a long time, and I guess the key takeaway on this slide is that I have several books out on gender theory. No, Freda, that is not a picture of my chest right there on the book. And also, if you look on the far right side, you can see in Time magazine, they didn't want to spend any more space on me. So if you look to the far, far right on your monitor, you probably can't see it, but there's a little red bar. It says Others Who Made a Difference. And they have over there right next to me Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. So I was in good company. So my mom loved that edition. A little bit about today's presentation. This is PowerPoint's based on work we've been doing with Motorola Solutions Foundation, also the Office of Adolescent Health and the Office on Women's Health. We're going to talk about some background for this discussion, get our terms and definitions straight, because terms like gender norms and femininity are always contested and overloaded terms in the English language. We're going to talk specifically about femininity and STEM and what I think are some interesting ideas that we're still learning about. We're going to hit a few common objections that I hear, and then finally talk about what are still some open questions on the area. And someone's doing a lot of typing in the background, I'm not sure, but whoever that is might want to just mute just a little bit. So by way of background, I think that as a field, we've done a great job on looking at external obstacles, chilly classroom climate, masculine pedagogy, lack of role models. You guys probably all know this because you do this. Also interpersonal obstacles like stereotype threat and so forth. We haven't done such a great job of really looking deeply at, you might call, internal obstacles. And primary among them, and of course what we're going to discuss most today, is girls' own belief systems and attitudes about femininity. So we're really doing a good job of clearing away and identifying some of the external things holding girls back. May not be doing a really great job on looking at the internal things that could be holding them back. So one of the reasons that I think this is important to look at, and I've had some people say, well, you know, it's really about just girls are being held back from STEM and their interest is being suppressed. But one of the questions you might want to put in the back of your mind is, if it's not about internal beliefs, if those are not a huge variable that we're overlooking, then why does STEM interest measurably decline right around what's called, and I'll get to this in a moment, that gender intensification period, age 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, where even girls who had good grades and who like STEM in elementary school suddenly start leaking from the leaky pipeline in earnest. What is it that is different at ages 8 to 14? And I think, obviously, one of the things that I would say is it has to do with the gender intensification period of late adolescence and early teens, where interest in traditional norms starts to accelerate among boys and girls, for that matter. I love that book title, Cinderella Ate My Daughter. I have an 8-year-old at home, so that cracks me up. It's about true, the lower right. But interest in traditional norms starts to accelerate, and belief for them starts to solidify. And obviously, learning to be masculine young men and feminine young women is a primary rite of passage, maybe the primary rite of passage for every adolescent. So what is it that shifted suddenly during those years? Were there not a lack of role models or chilly classroom climate and so forth before age 8, 9, 10? So I call this little exercise the 6 degrees of gender. This is about terms and definitions. I kind of make a joke off the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon website because, you know, Kevin's been in so many movies, connected to everything. Gender's like that. We connect it to almost everything. And I want to kind of disambiguate a little bit what I mean when I talk about gender norms. So I don't mean sex, which is, you know, primary and secondary physical characteristics, genitals, body hair, muscularity, and so forth. We're not referring to gender identity, which is an important thing. It refers to an inner sense of being male or female, very important when you're dealing with transgender or transsexual individuals who feel a conflict between their inner gender identity and their physical sex. We're also not really talking very much about gender expression, which is how we express feeling masculine or feminine through things like clothing, hairstyle, posture, even vocal inflection. And finally, sexual orientation, which I think is often confused with gender norms. Sexual orientation is romantic or sexual attraction to members of one or more sexes. What I do want to talk about with gender, actually there are two kind of parts to this. Gender equity, which is improving access and opportunities for everyone who's left behind, especially, of course, women and girls. And then finally, gender norms, which are the socially constructed ideals and scripts and expectations that almost all of us start learning from birth about what it means to be a boy or a girl. If you give a crying infant to parents and you say it's a boy, they'll say, oh, he's angry. If you tell them it's a girl, they'll say, oh, she's sad. They will promptly begin to stroke the girl. They'll start to balance the boy. So just really from birth, we start, these gender ideals start going out there and kids start absorbing them really quickly. And if you look at the literature, especially international-facing organizations, they've coined this new term, which is kind of a mouthful, called gender transformative, which refers to approaches to problem solving, not only STEM, but also teen pregnancy and partner violence, girlfriend abuse, approaches that try to hold up and highlight and ultimately challenge rigid gender norms and inequities. So we're going to be talking for the rest of today really about the gender norms part of this and how we can use gender norms to increase gender equity for women and girls when it comes to STEM. And if you look at that diagram, that little graphic in the lower right, if you do this right, if you really go into gender transformative in a deeper way than we have time today, you also look at intersections of race and class. We'll touch a little bit on that today, but you get this nice intersectional model that looks at race, class, and sexual orientation. You kind of get this full package when you do gender transformative approaches in depth. So I want to talk a little bit about what happens when organizations and funders, for that matter, in the U.S. say, we have a gender lens. We give with a gender lens. And this is actually one of the documents I use in trainings. I love grant making with a gender lens. It's excellent. But when you actually look for the phrase gender norms, it doesn't appear anywhere in the 36 pages, nor does the term masculinity or femininity. So when we say we have a gender lens in the U.S., really what we end up talking about is gender equity. This entire other half, the gender norms piece, has been left out. And so I think part of my work at True Child is to just try to rebalance our gender lens a little bit so it includes both pieces. So that's kind of a good segue into gender norms specifically. Let's talk about them. So as I mentioned, gender norms are learned. Yes, that is little Bow Wow kissing his biceps. During adolescence, we talked about this. They are highly regulated. The English language has, a little rough language coming up here, has an extremely elaborate vocabulary for calling out and stigmatizing the least degree of gender nonconformity. So very elaborate vocabulary for regulating gender displays that don't fit. Gender norms take practice. I don't know if you guys follow Boondocks. I like his work. You probably can't read this on some of your monitors, but he's making all these fierce faces, and then his brother peeks in and says, "Are you practicing your thug mug?" And he goes, "Yeah, keeping it real is hard work when you're cursed with cuteness." So he's practicing. And if you watch kids at that certain age, girls start practicing feminine behavior, everything from putting on makeup and practicing how to walk, and guys practice how to stand, and a whole bunch of things start happening. So really a primary rite of passage that kids practice, and by the time they're our age, it kind of seems normal, but you forget back when you actually had to try all that stuff on. A little bit about class here. The impact of gender norms is generally enhanced, as many things are in low-income environments, where gender codes on the street may be especially narrow, and penalties for transgressing them can be particularly harsh. This is so we kind of get into the specifics about gender norms. I'm going to talk a little bit about masculinity, and then we're going to move away from it. This comes from Byron Hurt, who did a wonderful documentary about misogyny, homophobia, and masculinity in hip-hop. And he said, you know, we're in this box, and you got to be strong, you got to be tough, you got to have girls, you got to be a player, you got to dominate other men, and if you're not those things, then people call you soft or weak or a chump. And so everybody stays inside the box. Now, I'll grant you there's some tough language, and it's very non-technical, but that's probably one of the best working definitions of masculinity, traditional masculinity I've ever seen. And if you look at that, it actually has impacts on behavior. And you can flip that on its head and say, well, what about femininity? Well, you know, femininity is primarily composed of what I call the 3 Ds. Girls are supposed to learn to be deferential, dependent, and desirable. And you can see all the Disney princesses I'm trying to wean my daughter off of kind of exemplify those things. And of course, they're supposed to be ultra thin, pretty, and preferably have long, straight hair, as all the princesses do. What's missing? Well, a lot of good things, like being logical, intellectual, you know, assertive, or independent. So when you look at those feminine norms, and experts have done this, you find that these internalized belief systems, have manifold impacts on actual behavior in a cluster of related areas. And so as girls believe more strongly in traditional feminine norms, they're more likely to leave school early, have earlier unplanned pregnancies, be victimized by partner abuse or partner violence, have high levels of dissatisfaction with their body, more likely to defer to male sexual prerogatives, have low self-esteem, etc., and be anxious or depressed. So there's kind of this real checklist of lower life outcomes that go along with internalizing these really narrow definitions of femininity. You become vulnerable to this, like I said, cluster, so much so that some people are referring to gender norms as a gateway belief system, with the idea that once you kind of walk through the gate, you get this kind of cluster of lower outcomes that you're vulnerable to in a bunch of related areas. When you look specifically at feminine norms in STEM, the research suggests, but I don't want to say, it doesn't document because we're not there yet, but it does suggest that girls face a double bind. They have to choose between opting out of femininity and opting out of STEM. Oh, sorry, wrong picture there. There we go. There's the right picture we want. Okay. And it especially happens right around 8, 9, 10, where the whole tomboy thing goes out the window, and girls really are expected to be more girly. So we actually started doing some focus groups for Motorola Solutions Foundation and asked them about this. And we said, do you have to make a choice between being pretty or smart? Or can you be both? And they all cracked up and they said, yeah, but not in junior high. And so we asked them about that, and they said, well, you can, but then they immediately went on to relate this pretty classmate who has long hair and no one talks to her because she's smart, she's like a nerd. So there's they know the right answer, which is, you can do it, but then they also say you can't do it in junior high, and look what happens to this one girl who's trying to do both. So they kind of know the reality of the pressures they're under. They also told us that the more they got interested in boys, the more there was this subtle pressure to dumb it down. The boys don't dig on girls who want to take apart their laptops and do trig in their heads. And I think, any of us who've had, young girls at home know that that's in fact the case. There's a lot of expectations, and they get stronger as the girls get older. I love that picture in the lower right. So we actually, toward the end of the focus groups, we did 3 of these, mostly with young women of color, presented them with the data. We pulled out a number of studies and said, look, what do you think is going on here? And what they said, they said during that period, that's when girls start giving up on math, that's when they start noticing boys. The boys want you to be pretty. The girls start worrying more about their looks and feel like academics don't count as much. These are not external barriers, and they are not going to be resolved by addressing external barriers. You can give these girls more role models and more opportunities and give them all laptops. These are belief systems and practices that are going on in middle school and that will have to be addressed, I think, if we're going to make more progress with girls in STEM. And I have to say, not only that it's not external, someone said to me, oh, you're blaming the victim. And I said, these girls are not. They're anything but victims. They are very conscious and very intentional about their disengagement with STEM. And we have to start talking with them about it. So in addition to doing the external barriers, we're hoping the field will start to do more about the internal barriers and practices, because these girls are very conscious and intentional. They've thought about this. but we're not really talking to them about that. So at some point, someone will say, you know, so is it all gender? And I want to say no. I'm not trying to say this gender is the only dog in the fight. Obviously, it's not. I hope I've been in pains to say that. We're not even saying it's the biggest dog in the fight. It's not the biggest variable out there. We are saying it's the biggest dog not in the fight. If you were looking for the next big drop on the meter on programmatic effectiveness, the next big variable that would help your programs be more effective, you would want to look at internalized feminine norms. Clearly, it's the elephant in the room. Now I'm mixing animal metaphors. I just shifted from dogs to parking meters to elephants, so forgive me on that. But clearly, it's kind of the elephant in the room. It's the big thing that kind of all of us know, but none of us are really addressing. So I think what it's left us with, and you probably can't see this, maybe too small on your monitors, is a bunch of open questions. If you look at the literature, and I love Google Scholar, I did some Google Scholar searches on, you know, femininity in STEM, feminine engineering and math. You get thousands of studies that come up, and so you think, well, you know, the researchers have really done their job. But then when you actually look deeper, the studies don't really, first of all, they don't address girls. They tend to address cultural belief systems, often among adults. They hardly ever look at girls, and when they do, it's never applied. It's, you know, we interviewed, you know, 40 college freshmen, you know, and they told us X. So I think if you buy the argument that feminine norms are crucial, there's some really interesting and cutting-edge questions here that we could address. Part of it has to do not only with girls' belief systems, but also what seems to be a key variable is what boys think about girls in STEM, or perhaps more accurately, what girls think boys think about them. Girls form beliefs that boys will not find them attractive, and in fact, sometimes they don't, but they form these ideals and beliefs in their head, and then they act on them. It may be even that down the road, we'll have to not only be addressing girls in STEM, but to get better outcomes for girls in STEM, we'll have to also address the boys around them, which I think is fascinating. It's kind of counterintuitive because you think, God, you know, we're not putting enough money into girls as it is. Why waste it on boys? But it may turn out that what boys believe and communicate to girls is a critical variable here, almost as important as what the girls themselves believe about STEM. So we've put together what I call a mini curriculum with Motorola, and this will be online shortly. We're testing with a couple groups, and they're very simple exercises. They're fun to do. Most of these are in use in the international space, and we've really tried to adapt them to our partnering organizations. SUNY STEM Project is using this, and Project Exploration in Chicago are helping us pilot it. And they're just really simple, easy to learn, easy to teach, fun exercises that there are about 6 of them. They each take about an hour or so to do, so it's not like you're going to have to turn your program on its head. But we hope that anyone could integrate this into their existing STEM programming and hopefully get better results. Our proposition is that you get better results if you talk to girls about the pressures they're under around feminine norms than if you don't. I think that's uncontroversial, but the fact is it remains very much an open question, and we're looking forward to exploring this, you know, with our partners at Motorola, EdLab, and of course the STEM Equity Pipeline and NAEP. So that's kind of my end of it. Gregory, if you or Freda would like to jump in, that would be awesome.
Thanks, Ricky. I can see that some people are beginning to type a question, but I wanted to ask you specifically, I know that you have this curriculum that's coming, and there's some activities that can be used, but how do we address these internal barriers? I mean, are there things that we can be doing I want to know, even at elementary school or as parents, or besides what we might do in our STEM programs?
I don't know the answer to that, and I have a daughter who's 8 and wants to be a vet, and one of the things that I do to armor her, of course she's addicted to her iPad, is every week I change her iPad password. I think last week it was antibiotics. She has to not only spell it to get in, she has to tell me what it means. So I'm trying to start early, but I don't think we know. I think ideally we would like to start with these girls as early as 6, 7, 8 and start, you know, you're not going to change kids' minds of anything. I can't change my daughter's mind about what Nickelodeon channel to watch. What I want her to do is I want her to think critically. You know, I want her to think critically and consciously about what she's being told girls have to do. So when the pressure does come, oh, girls don't do science, she's got an answer, she's thought about it. And it may not be the answer that I wanted to have, but I at least want to have that conversation. But I think it's a great question, Freda. We don't have that answer yet. We're just starting to test what would be effective tools. And I'm hoping to learn in this pilot, you know, if these exercises are effective, and if so, if we can amp them up and make them even more effective. And hopefully after this next round, we've asked Motorola. I already saw Stephanie's already asking, will it be made available? So I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. But it will be available as soon as we've done piloting it. We should be done piloting by the end of the summer. It'll be up on our website. If someone just wants to see a copy of it, I'm happy to send it around. We've actually asked Motorola for a grant to scale this up, and we'll be looking for partnering organizations to do that with in the fall. And that's our hope, is to scale this up and make it available to everyone who wants it. Thank you for that question, Stephanie.
Yes, I can see there's some other questions that ask here. Have you contacted Project Lead the Way to partner with them and their STEM curriculum?
I have not.
Okay, so that's maybe
sorry,
an idea.
I should know about them, and I don't. So if someone wants to send me a link, I'll be glad to check that out.
Okay, thank you. Another question: will audience members receive an email about when and where RIKI's curriculum is available? So when it becomes available, you can let us know, and we can put that on the NAEP and the STEM Equity?
Yeah, I can send you a copy. It's just we've got embargoed on it because we're trying not to spam the universe because it hasn't been tested, frankly. But I'd love to get it out and just get people's ideas and thoughts and opinions on it while we're trying to pilot it. I also want to say, I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. I'm not sure that the same exercises that work in downtown Detroit will work equally well in Lubbock, Texas. I think you probably have to adapt them a little bit to the gender culture that your girls live in. But I would be delighted to share that, and if people just want to let you know, I'll send you a copy, and you can, you know, flush it out to everybody who wants it.
Okay, we can do that. So just if you send it to us, we'll get it out to everyone that's on the webinar. The next question is, let's see, I've got to see what the next question is. I'm looking over on the other side of the chat, just a sec. How can industry contribute to this issue?
How can industry contribute to this issue? That's a really good question. I mean, we would like to see more support for this among corporations. I think there are a lot of corporations doing STEM work, and there are at least a handful that are really specifically interested in girls. I would like to see much more interest. Right now, Motorola, I think, has been our saving grace in terms of their willingness to go out on a limb with this. It certainly was new 3 years ago, and now I think we've kind of established it. But we need more corporations to take a handle on this. And I just want to say, we talk mostly about girls in STEM, but there are also masculinity pressures that dweeby technoid boys are also not seen as the most manly, and there's also a masculinity pressure on boys not to be good at STEM. And to go into sports and that kind of thing. So even for funders and corporate foundations that really feel that this doesn't include boys, it does. The gender norms thing is important to both sides of the equation. So hopefully corporations will realize this is in their interest.
The next question is it effective to use media examples to point out gender stereotypes and opportunities to show where men find smart women attractive? Parentheses, how do you feel about Big Bang Theory making nerdy sexy?
I love that kind of stuff. I don't know if it's effective or not. I certainly try to encourage it with my daughter. We certainly hope that it helps. I think anything we can do to armor these girls up and challenge them to think and call out the gender stereotypes are really helpful. And that can be, even when someone tried to give my daughter, the science Barbie, we immediately went into, well, why is she walking on her tiptoes? Why is she in pink? Why are all her, it's like, I want her to think. So anything you can do, I think, is helpful.
Well, I think it's one of the things that you said that's most important is that we teach all children to critically think about what they're exposed to and what's happening around in their own social circle. And okay, next question. Based on the research, what age are girls most likely to be impacted by most by these social or societal influences? So based on
Start
research,
right
at what
around 8 or 9.
age? About 8 or 9?
That gender intensification period is really middle school. It starts around 8, but really 9, 10, 11, 12. I mean, it coincides with puberty. There's no mystery there. And, you know, kids, I mean, boys want to be seen as masculine young men. Women want to learn to be seen as feminine young women. And there's a lot of pressure on them to do so. And that seems to be also the time that the leaky pipeline suddenly starts leaking girls in earnest. So that seems to be the critical period. I think trying to intervene when they're 16, 17, or 18, you know, the cake is probably baked. So it's right around that critical period that I hope we can have an impact.
Okay, this is a question that relates to the curriculum. Do they include both boys and girls, the classroom exercises that are in the curriculum?
No, and I wish they did. Motorola Solutions is very committed to bringing greater equity to girls in STEM, and that was our brief as well, but we would eventually like to have the resources, and frankly, we need program partners. We only work with groups on the ground. I mean, we don't, you know, we're only consultants. We would like to expand it and do the same thing with boys. And not only the pressures on masculinity that force boys out of STEM, but the pressures around the expectations that boys have that girls who do STEM aren't cute and aren't attractive. Because I think that will have a big impact on the girls. So there's a whole bunch of really cool, interesting questions here for us to explore that are really new. And I mean, you guys are asking almost all of them, but that I think is the next place to go, is we need to start looking at the boy part of the equation.
Okay, the next thing, Jill has posted a website for you, which is Project Lead the Way, and it has some great courses and curriculum, and it might be interesting to look at the courses and curriculums and just review them from this point of view about internal barriers. Next question, is the curriculum being piloted strictly with girls? I ask because RIKI commented on the need to educate young male as well. If not, you're aware of any initiatives to include all genders? And you have answered that question, but do you know of any initiatives?
No, we're just starting with girls around this. The whole thing around feminine norms, as I said, really has not been explored in the STEM space. Even though I think we kind of all get it, this is still new turf. So we're all kind of we're gonna learn some interesting things together around this, I think.
Okay, the next question says, do you think single gender programs are more effective than combined gender?
Janice, I'm not going to step foot in that discussion. I'm still having it with my partner. She wants our daughter in a single gender program. I'm not convinced. I don't really know the answer. I think the jury is still out.
I will speak up and say one thing is that NAEP does have a stand about single gender programs in school curriculum, and believes that that is not the best way, from the research that they have looked at, to promote STEM with our success in STEM areas or in higher curriculum math and science classes, but to have both genders and to use teaching techniques or teaching strategies that are effective for all students.
And I would stand by the NAEP position, even if I disagree with it, Freda. I am totally behind that position.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. Let someone will speak up. I'm a chicken when it comes to that question. I still just I don't know.
I do think that there are a lot of people typing now, and I know that, though I don't, that NAEP also supports specific programs that are summer programs or after-school programs that are single-sex. Let's see, it says, let's see, do you have a link to that research? I will try to find it because I don't have it on hand right now, Janice. So I see that other people are typing, and I'll just have to wait till they're through typing to ask you the next question, RIKI. Okay, next question. Has any of your research been done with representatives from various cultural backgrounds?
Yes, we try to get diverse groups of girls. I think in this first round we really have focused on young women of color for a whole bunch of reasons. But the idea is to have groups that are culturally and racially diverse. And again, I just want to say, these are this is our first round of piloting this, so it hasn't scaled up. It's no bigger than SUNY and Project Exploration in Chicago. So we're going to learn from these two groups. So it's still very small.
Well, and I did notice that when you were speaking that you talked about or gave some information about that the socioeconomic status makes a difference on sometimes how much impact that these barriers, that the societal barriers have upon young people.
Yeah, it's interesting. Other cultures, for instance, in Japan, girls are expected to do well in math, and they do. But girls also internalize that, and the Japanese don't see anything unfeminine about girls who are really good at doing math. We do. So you have to believe at some point these internalized belief systems have to be impacting the girls.
This is from Wendy. I wanted to share that I went to an all-girls high school and we did not face the kind of problems highlighted in the talk. I'm sure it differs by city too. Next question. Not a question but a thought. Children who are questioning their gender identity or don't fall into rigid gender roles may struggle in the same gender classes. It adds to their stressors. Next comment. I work in youth development with individuals ages 10 through 24. In regards to programming with females age 14 plus, are there different or specific approaches we should take with them, seeing as though they have passed the 8 to 10-year-old milestones? Parentheses, assuming that these girls have not had much previous experience in STEM.
I don't know. I mean, we're only testing it with girls in that narrow range, like 10 to 13. And again, these are just the first 2 pilot rounds, so we're still learning. So I don't know what to say. I don't think anything would probably be better than nothing. But I think it gets harder as girls get older, obviously.
Well, and I was thinking that Jamie's comment and question might be good to have on the blog, to have maybe some input from some people who are running programs that are at an older age, and they might have some results that they could share with us. The next question, this is from Susan. Is there an issue in other countries? And you did indicate about Japan, so do you want to make any more comment about that? Are there any other countries that you know about?
There's a recent article that came out that, U.S. girls score worse on things like math than girls in almost every other developed country. I mean, at some point you have to believe that the belief systems we have about femininity, which are very narrow in the U.S., are at least part of the problem. If it certainly isn't innate, otherwise it would be the same from culture to culture. So clearly, cultural beliefs around girliness play a role. The question is kind of, can we come up with a curriculum that helps us counter those?
Okay, next question. There are many suggestions on how to work with girls in AAUW's research report, Why So Few? Women in STEM, that came out in 2010, and I would agree that that is a good resource.
Yeah, we've done some great work with the AAUW around different things. I like them.
Let's see, I see that someone is typing. So wait till their comment comes in.
I'd like to see the AAUW talk more about feminine norms. Frankly, I was actually on their panel when they launched that, and I did talk about it, but it wasn't something that got picked up by a lot of my co-presenters. So I'd like to hear more about that from some of the leading lights in the field.
Okay, Anna says, we would probably be interested in working with you more, Riki. I eagerly await the results of your work. And this person is from AAUW, so maybe you two can make contact. Anna?
Catherine Hill, my best. Tell Catherine Hill I love her work. We actually mention her in one of our reports. Tell her I look forward to working with the AAUW anytime I can. We actually worked on the reissue of Hostile Hallways. We did the lit review around that, but love your work. Thank you for being on the call today.
And Anna, I'm sure you maybe have the contact for Riki, but for everyone else, just know that in the file section on the left where it says NAEP webinar resource document, you have the links to be able to, and the email address to be able to contact Riki.
Absolutely.
So do we have any more questions coming in? I don't see anyone else typing.
These have been great. And I just want to say, for those of you who are on the call, we I want to shine some sunlight on Freda and Gregory, because we had to go through a lot of, I actually ended up doing this not from my desk in office in DC, but from someone else's office on a strange computer in the middle of downtown San Francisco. So they had to hang in there for a lot. Everything that could have gone wrong, the connection, the microphone, the audio, the computer, and I just want to thank them again for hanging in there and making this webinar possible. And also our sponsors, Motorola Solutions Foundation. It's been a blast, and I hope we can come back and do this again in 6 months and tell you all what we learned from this pilot, and then we're ready to finally start disseminating. So thank you again, NAEP. You guys have been great.
Ricky is saying that the NAEP file includes the True Child's website, but not your address, so I must not have put it in there. Can they email you directly with you?
I'm putting it in now.
Thank you.
I even spelled it right.
Okay, and I wanted to ask you another question. There were a lot of good questions that were brought up. Are you willing to, if I put the blog back up, could we put some of those questions in there and see if people will answer and talk about it?
I would love to see a really robust discussion up there. So yes, please. And just if you could send me that link, as I probably misplaced it. I've been away from the office long enough, but I would love to see, I mean, not just my answers. I think I kind of know what I think. I'd love to hear what some of the people who attended think and hear a discussion among them. So it's a great idea.
So I'm asking everybody who is on right now, are you aware that we ran a blog on the NAEP website, and we would like to continue that maybe next week or the rest of this week, and just let me know by typing, would you be willing to get on the blog and share information or ask questions? I've got some people typing now. Yes, 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 I will. Yes, yes. Okay, that's what we wanted to hear. Okay, so Greg will get that going, get the blog going again. We'll work with Nancy and get that up and see if we can't continue some of the discussion from today.
And I have to leave now, but thank you again. This has been one of the best discussions and certainly the most intelligent questions, and I've done this webinar several times, so thank you all for making this so good. And you all have a good day. Thanks again.
Thanks, Ricky, and I'm going to continue with our part of the webinar. Thank you so much, and thanks to NAEP and to the National Science Foundation. I would encourage everyone to join and view the virtual learning community and the archive webinars. I think I want to listen to this one again. It's at the stemequitypipeline.org. Thanks for participating in the webinar, and we look forward to you participating in future webinars. I do want to share with you that we're going to run a book club in June. Anyway, we're going to have 3 different times we'll have a discussion group, and so be looking for the, I'll probably put that out in the next week or so, the advertisement or blast for that. Please complete the certificate of completion, which is page 2 of the evaluation survey, and know that the evaluation survey is not connected to the part you complete for the certificate of completion, so that both are separate, but they're one together when you respond, but only our evaluator looks at them. And Greg, are you ready to post? When will the recording be up? I see another question. Usually, Greg, when is the recording going to be up of the webinar?
Usually tomorrow. Sometimes it takes longer, but tomorrow, if it all works well.
Okay. And then you have the evaluation survey that you can put up. Greg's going to post it, and he also will be putting it down into the chat function. So, Greg, do you want to tell him what happens with this?
Yes, Freda. So I also just run it, for this live and archive webinar, I just put up a short survey. It should open in another tab in your browser. Please complete this for us now. I will also send you an email with a link to the survey in case you don't have time to fill it out now. And for the archive webinar, for some folks, please refer back to your registration email with the link to the survey. So thank you. Anything else, Freda?
No, I think it's been a great webinar, and I appreciate everyone being on. And fill out your survey, please, and let us know how things went, and then look for the blog on the NAEP website. Thank you.